Welcome to Thursdays on the Stoop. I'm Julian. We are Blue Stoop. We're a literary arts organization serving the greater Philadelphia area. And today we have Inhabiting a Story on stage, the team from Philly Story Fest. Take it away, friends.
Hi, all. My name's Tay. I'm one of the founders of StoryFest. And yeah, really excited to be chatting with you all about um, what it takes to tell a story on stage. Also, hopefully, generating some interest in giving us pitches for our show. We're actively curating this show right now. And so, this could be a cool way of us starting a working relationship together. And I'll pass it over to Grace.
Hi y'all, my name is Grace. I live here in Philly. I'm excited to be here. I'm a teacher at Westchester Community College, and I actually got involved in StoryFest pretty recently because I went to StoryFest in Philly this fall, and I was so blown away by the show that I just sent them a cold email and have started to get involved. But yeah, I'm really excited to meet more writers about Philly, and yeah, really excited to be here.
Cool. All right. So we'll hop into it. So today we're talking about, yeah, telling a story on stage, which, is despite storytelling being the oldest art form on the planet, is kind of new to a lot of folks. So yeah, let's talk about what StoryFest is. We actually started this project in Philadelphia at the Bach Building, in South Philly in 2023. And the idea, was to build community, make local journalism and art feel a little bit more fun, and connected to the community. And at its core, basically, StoryFest is people getting up on stage and telling stories. These are often true stories, but they're also sometimes poetry, sometimes fiction, dance, theater, film. You kind of name it, it's a bit of a variety show. Um, each story is pretty short. It's like 5 to 10 minutes. And all of the stories are connected to a central theme. Grace will elaborate on the theme for this year in a minute or so. Um, and the storytellers are, yeah, sometimes local journalists, sometimes sources, artists, authors, community members. So, any of you could be a storyteller. So that first year that we were at the Bach building, we sold out and had another like 300 or so people on the wait list, which was like a really great endorsement that we were doing something right or that people were excited about the project. And since then, we've expanded to, we're going to be in 5 cities this year, which is kind of wild. So if you're not based in Philly, I think someone mentioned that they're no longer in Philly. We're also in Chicago, New York, San Francisco, and Detroit. And so if you're in any of those vicinities, and have story ideas, like we're talking about Philly mostly today, but open to pitches for all of those cities. And then, yeah, this year for StoryFest, we are going to be at the Philly Film Center on December 3rd and 4th. And so, yeah, it'll be a 2 night affair this time around. And I will pass to Grace to talk a little bit about the theme. Oh,
Um,
sorry, I forgot we had a trailer. So that was just a little sizzle from our show at Detroit last year. And it's amazing what, a 45-second video will do in terms of telling a story. Pictures speak 1,000 words, truly. Okay, now I will pass to Grace to talk about the theme.
Cool. So yeah, each Storyfest, each year has one theme, and each city stories are all centered around that theme. This year is villains, stories about what we fear, what we misunderstand, and what we become. So all sorts of different types of stories work for Storyfest. Villains is really meant to be kind of a spark and a jumping off point. Um, but we are looking for stories of all sorts of different tones. So, on the in the same show, stories that are extremely funny, stories that are extremely serious, stories that I think the best stories always hold both. For example, one of the funny stories that we're working with a storyteller right now is about the villainy of someone hogging the middle armrest on a plane when you can't get comfortable and you feel like they're like edging your elbow out. That's a story that's like in one moment and really just kind of a hilarious anecdote. We're also working with a storyteller who's telling a more serious story about a time that she's a laboratory scientist and she was talking about what it was like to work with a lab that was doing animal testing and the kind of internal turmoil that she experienced working in this lab. So stories can be on every kind of plot point on the spectrum in terms of tone. Um, Also, stories of a lot of different kind of grain sizes can work. There can be stories about a really mundane experience, like, a moment in an airplane. And there can be stories that are, really significant or even important nationally, politically. So in the same Storyfest show, there could be a political story about ICE, followed by a story about a weird encounter that you had on SEPTA the other day. And each of those things can be a story kind of worth our attention. Next, I think stories that work really well for Storyfest are stories that take kind of an unexpected angle on the theme. So I think the hope of the show is to really help people expand their thoughts on a certain theme. So trying to complicate the usual tropes that come to mind when you think of villains. That they're like the classic villains we hear of that are blatantly bad and do villainous things in kind of really explicit ways. And we're trying to showcase stories that kind of complicate those tropes and that maybe have unexpected twists to them. A couple of examples. Um, we're working with a storyteller who's going to tell a story about a politician whose villainy is that he's actually just a really kind of nice, neutral guy who really doesn't want to make anyone mad and is very careful in his work, makes a lot of committees. And so he doesn't follow the certain trope of villains in which it's always like this like one kind of villainous action. The villainy in this story is actually about his inaction and kind of the niceness and the neutrality that if you're a politician and you're supposed to be making change or addressing things, that actually inaction can be just as much a form of villainy as action. So that's kind of like an unexpected take on the villain theme. Um, and a villain can really be anything. A villain can be a person, an idea, a system, an attitude. Again, it can go really small and really specific to really big. But I think what all these stories have in common is that they're anchored on particular moments and memories. So even if the villainous system is like, uh, our economic, if the villain is capitalism, it's not an essay or a diatribe about a villainous system. It's speaking to that villainy through a specific moment or memory that you can really bring to life from your own experience. And maybe lastly, to talk about what kind of stories work well for this opportunity, there's a big multimedia component to StoryFest, as you kind of saw in the video. Uh, Dance, film, song. When I went to StoryFest this fall in Philly, there was a story about this woman who went to a cheese competition. And the story hinged around this very specific type of Parmesan cheese. And when she was done telling the story, she told us to all look under our seats, and they had given us each a tiny piece of Parmesan cheese taped under the seat. So the multimedia can be a little strange and delightful like that. The multimedia could also be a little bit more classic, like yeah, this fall in Philly, there was a storyteller whose story was about a song that they had heard on the radio that reminded them of home. And midway through the story, a whole band came out and started singing that song. Maybe different than some other live storytelling events like the Moth, the multimedia component really helps bring the stories alive. But yeah, it's a really fun theme, and also is meant to be that spark. So it doesn't have to match perfectly, but we're looking for kind of interesting angles on the theme of villains. Tay, do you have anything to add on villains, or we could do a little bit of an activity on villains with everyone?
No, I don't have too much to add. I think you summed it up pretty well. Let's do a little activity.
Okay, so just to stoke kind of some thinking on the villains theme in case you want to pitch a story to StoryFest, I'm wondering if we could all take a minute and just think and write in the chat um, to either one of two prompts. One is who or what is a villain in your own life? And or who are Philadelphia's villains? So I'll put that in the chat, but take a minute and if you feel like sharing to one or both of these prompts, we'd love to hear.
Self is a classic villain and something that, yeah, very much fits the what we become, the Patriots.
SEPTA for sure. I actually was telling some of my students about StoryFest today, and I asked them who were Philadelphia's villains, and I think 80% of them said SEPTA. I feel like there could be a whole show with the theme as just SEPTA, actually.
Oh, I would love to do that. I'm such a transportation nerd. Cool. All right. Keep, if you have ideas that occur to you, throughout the rest of this session, feel free to drop them in the chat. I think we'll move on to the next section. Grace, if you want to introduce it, well, I just get ready to review my notes.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for all these. I'm just reading through the chat. And at the end, if we have some more time, I'd love for folks to share about these and hear more about the kind of villain angles that you see on these things. Indecision. Oh my goodness. That's the villain I can absolutely resonate with. Um, Okay, well, we are, yeah, hoping to have a conversation today and work together to think about the craft of oral storytelling in particular, and how you all, as writers, might adapt writing practices to the craft of oral storytelling. And instead of just talking about what makes for a good story, Tay is actually going to tell a story, and we're going to think about it together in context of just one story. Um, and I think all of us have instincts, I think, about what makes a good story. I think we all know like when we lean in and when we remember stuff, and maybe you can think of like the great storytellers you know. And it's not something where like you have it or you don't. There are really particular tools that work well for spoken stories. And so we're hoping today to create kind of a toolkit together of paying attention and noticing craft in a specific story. And then, yeah, kind of gathering a toolkit of things that you can use for your own story craft. So Tay is going to tell a story or the beginning of a story that he actually told for one of StoryFest events. And we're going to pause a couple times after each couple moments and just talk about what's working and what we notice. And yeah, see if we can identify some tools.
Cool. So I'm in my early 20s with a newly minted theater degree and honestly, not much else. I'm working odd jobs at like a cafe, bussing tables, tutoring kids. And after a shift one day, I get a call from a good friend, and he tells me that he's gotten a starring role on Broadway. And I am so stoked for him. But as I'm clearing some guy's cold fries off of his plate, all I could think about was being on stage. And I started to wonder if I couldn't get the part here, maybe I could get the part somewhere else. So I decided that I was going to make it big in Japan. And just like that, I arrive in Tokyo and I actually find a performing job pretty damn quick. A performing job at a call center called Telephone English.
All right, we're gonna pause there for a second. Um, okay, so very simple question. What did you notice? What's something you noticed or something that worked for you about the beginning part of the story?
I think that the story right now is being conveyed in this very casual tone, as if we were just sitting on the couch together discussing it. But I think also the sensory image of like cold fries, I think it's very clear to imagine that and how dreary or depressing that might be. But then also the surprise element of like Japan of all places and a call center. So that's what I picked up on so far.
Totally. Yeah, the image of the cold fries. Like I can almost I can see them and taste them.
There was just like some dry humor in there, like call center. That is your stage. Very, very subtle but funny, you know?
And just reading from the chat, right? Another, yeah, dry humor. And a couple people have mentioned this very quick turn where like it goes from the cafe to the idea of Japan, and there's kind of a whiplash of like, oh wait, it kind of like makes you sit up and pay attention, like something's happening. Erica's setting it, it says it's setting up the stakes. Absolutely. What did that, I'm curious if we can zoom in on like the jump in time. Uh, why do you guys think that Tay made that jump? You know, there's obviously so much that happens in between the moment in the cafe and being in Japan. What does that do? Like, why make that choice?
Is it like setting the scene and then completely like recalibrating it? So like you set it so slowly and then just quickly you turn it. So then you're like, wait, what? What just happened? You know?
Hmm. Totally. Yeah, there's definitely like I think rhythm is really prominent in oral stories where those jumps can be felt, I think, all that much more than in writing when you like quicken the pace and you bring people somewhere else. Hmm.
I
One
think it's
other thing.
also, yeah, sorry, Grace, go ahead.
No, no, you.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes you'll get home and you'll ask your roommate or your partner, like, how was your day? And they'll walk you through the minutia of their entire day and their journey on SEPTA and all of these like sort of things that are maybe not the most captivating or interesting. And so with oral storytelling, especially with our format of only having 5 or 10 minutes, we need to be really efficient and just jump to the most important parts and scenes. And you don't necessarily need a massive preamble to get us from, you know, the cafe to Tokyo. You can do it pretty quickly. Sorry,
Totally.
Grace, what
Yeah,
were you saying?
every no, yeah, every sentence has to do an amount of work. And I feel like sometimes when I'm writing and there's no real limit to how much writing there can be, I can stay zoomed in to the stuff at all times because you can just keep going. But with a story, the attention span, I don't know what you guys would say the attention span for a person telling a story is, but in my experience, it's 10 minutes is kind of the upper limit. And so you have this like scarce resource where like every sentence is really precious. And maybe if some of you are, you know, short story writers, you might feel this in your own writing. But you have to choose when you're zooming in and when you're zooming out, and that can be one of the most kind of fun and creative craft choices that a storyteller can make. Because the same story, you could zoom in on two different moments and like the entire thing will change. Um, just looking to the chat. Yeah, short story like flash fiction, falling asleep. People go through the details of their day. Totally. Yeah. There's a lot to think about in terms of attention and how to capture it in an oral story. And I know a lot of you have mentioned like when you made that unexpected jump to Japan, it makes people like pause and focus for a little second. Okay. Why don't we move on? Tay, do you want to continue?
Sure. Okay, so at a call center called Telephone English. So the way it would work is that Japanese parents would request the ABCs and other songs, and I would sing those songs to teach the kids English. My persona when I answered the phone was basically me, but with the Disney dialed up to 11. Thanks for calling Telephone English. My name's Jackson. What's your name? God, if my friend on Broadway saw me now singing the ABC song to kids in a call center full of other people singing the ABC song to kids, the thought made me cringe. When I hang up, the chipper Jackson persona fades away. I'm clocking out of a call center very, very far away from the spotlight. And then I get a break. The ABC company wants me to perform in their traveling shows in front of live audiences. Suddenly, I'm taking the bullet train all over the country. The pay was absurd. I was playing for sold out crowds. I was actually recognized in the streets. My fans just happened to be 6-year-olds. That's me next to the giant frog. And yeah, we can pause there.
Let's definitely pause at the giant frog. Such an awesome photo. All right, so the story has progressed. Let's ask the same question. What do you notice and what is working for you?
I think one, the photo is really, really great just because it sort of melts any kind of like not tension, but it just makes everyone laugh, which is always a great thing to do to get some kind of physical response out of everyone. I think the changing of your voice to show what it sounded like when people were calling you up to sing the ABCs is a really good touch. Um, but I think also by this point, as the audience, I'm relating to you in a lot of ways and like wanting you to win and wanting you to like get to whatever state of happiness you want because it's like we're feeling the disappointment with you or we're feeling the like exhaustion or the exasperation. So
Yeah, that's such a great point. I think storytelling in this form, or really in any form, is such a great vehicle for feeling empathy and sympathy for other people and understanding their world and their perspective. And the best stories, despite this happening in Tokyo, you might have never been to Tokyo and not even understand this world, but you get a sense for what my perspective was at that time.
Yeah, some of them. Oh no, go ahead, Erica.
Okay, I really liked how the beat set up, this initial like, I'm a theater kid, and this is all great. And then it goes, so it's like, okay, everything's okay, into the disappointment, into I'm gonna like change this and the excitement again of going to Japan and then back to the beat of oh no, like the disappointment. And then the next beat isn't like is funny because it's like a dream, but is it the dream? Like the version of the dream that comes about. So it has this really nice sequence that echo each other, but they're not exactly the same. So there's variety in the echo. If that's kind of how it struck me.
Totally. I didn't notice that. Yeah, that kind of mirror until you mentioned that, but it's totally true. And you were calling out like the kind of complications on expectations is something that, yeah, I think it feels really satisfying to hear when you expect it to be one way and it gets complicated one way, and then you expect it to go another and it gets complicated again. Um, so yeah, it's like the cycles, but also the breaking of the cycles that work really well. And Kayla, to your point, I think the empathy, like often it can come through in really small moments. Like I know when Tay had like the sigh after he hung up the telephone of like, I just am imagining every time that I'm ever like on the phone or trying to kind of perform for someone, and then you can finally like relax and be yourself. Like in oral storytelling, like the body language of that, and even like the idea of a sigh and being able to use your voice for that uh, can do a lot.
Yeah, to expand on that a little bit, you could use your voice when telling a story to mirror how you're feeling at that point in the story, assuming you are a character in the story, which most often you are, especially when telling sort of personal anecdotes. And so if you can get, let's say the story is about running and you're out of breath and you can like mirror that physical exhaustion that you're feeling by the way that you breathe. And that can be a really great way of like, yeah, making the story just feel a little bit more tactile and real.
Any last thoughts? Particular lines that you feel like you'll remember. Something that I find really helpful in oral storytelling, because you're not going to have it to read again, is to think about memory. And like you can remember the feeling of a story. Sometimes you can remember the flash of an image. You oftentimes won't remember the whole thing. But paying attention to like what would be the one line or image that you would remember from this piece of the story can kind of help cue you into when you're writing a story, like how can I uh, craft things in which there will be something memorable for people to really take away. So I'm curious, if you were to remember one line or image from what Tay's shared so far, what do you think it would be and why?
I like the part where they said like my audience happened to be 6-year-olds. It was just so funny and on point. And it was like so keen on the audience. And then it's like a 6-year-old. And then the image came and I was like, oh, so funny, but so cute, It hit me. Yeah, yeah. Caroline said the same thing. Too good. Too good.
Yeah, that rhythm is there again. You mentioned it's like the setup, like the beat, the drop of the 6-year-old, and then the image flash. And that's what's so cool about the multimedia is like it gives you another tool in your rhythm toolkit to play with, like a beat that you're driving people along. Maybe one last thing that I'll call out that I find really works for me in spoken stories is verbatim dialogue. It can be easy to just describe, like, oh, and then he told me, I would say something like this, or I was, this is what the phone call was like. But actually being able to like speak dialogue and, you can change your voice and things like that. But it changes because you are speaking and there's uh, yeah, in the written form, you can play with spacing, and dialogue often looks different. In an oral story too, to get that rhythm and kind of shake things up, having spoken lines can do that really well. Okay, Tay, do you want to continue?
Sure. Okay, so where did we leave off? That's me next to the giant frog. That image stayed on the screen for way too long. Okay, so one weekend before another sold out show, I was rocking out to Les Mis with my co-star, Arisa. And she turns to me and she says, you know, you actually have a really good voice. And I'm like, actually? And she says, okay, so it's kind of weird, but I work for this company that produces karaoke tracks, and I think you could sing for them. I don't really understand. So she breaks it down for me. When you punch in a song at karaoke, they usually can't play the original recording of the song. The rights are too expensive. So karaoke companies re-record the drums, the keys, the guitar, the vocals, the oohs, the ahs, and the yas. And I'm intrigued. She continues. Japan invented karaoke, and they've taken the technology further than really anyone else. In a Japanese karaoke booth, if you're feeling a little shy, you can select guide vocal, and you'll be accompanied by a vocal track. You, she says to me, could be that guide vocal.
Okay. Um, this will be our last pause. Anyone have anything that they want to call out from that section? Okay. Well, let's see, before we go on and kind of talk about some kind of bigger picture thoughts about the story and the arc and the narrative. Um, Mostly because I'm kind of curious what happened. Tay, do you want to either summarize the ending of your story, or given the time, I think you could also tell it, but your choice.
Um, yeah, I guess I will summarize it. So basically, I get this opportunity from my co-star to record these karaoke vocals. And suddenly I'm going to these like swanky recording studios in Tokyo, um, in Shibuya, and I'm starting to feel the imposter syndrome like really hard at this point because I'm following these people that are like incredible. And I'm going into these recording sessions and re-recording sort of your top 40 artists, your Ed Sheerans, your Justin Bieber, etc. Um, and then one day I'm thrown this like huge challenge, which is to try to cover a Bruno Mars song. And I mean, behind the scenes, I kind of had written Bruno Mars off as just like a generic pop star, but he's actually so good. Like his vocals are insane. And so the imposter syndrome like really kicks. And I'm trying to figure out how to cover this guy. And then I summon this sort of like internal confidence and nail the next take. And the sort of kicker of the story is, I did these sessions for probably 2-ish years, 2 or 3 years. And so if you go to do karaoke in Japan and punch in Ed Sheeran or Bruno Mars, we're likely doing a duet. And then at the end of the story, I sang Uptown Funk live in front of the audience. So that was, yeah, a really fun sort of like interactive karaoke experience.
Anyone a Bruno Mars fan?
It's funny,
We
I'm
got
actually going to see him tonight. I'm in Toronto and he's playing 5 nights here. So it's gonna be a blast. I'm hoping he invites me on stage to perform.
I bet he has no idea what a fan who has spent so much time with the songs is in the audience. Um, awesome. Well, I'm very sad that Tay will not be singing that song here today because of time. But let's think about the story for a bit, kind of as a whole. And something that I think is an important question in oral storytelling is the difference between an anecdote and a story. And I'm wondering if, and feel free to just unmute and we can have a discussion. What is the difference between an anecdote and a story? What do you think makes Tay's story a story rather than an anecdote?
Well, weren't there like multiple anecdotes in his story? Like And so anecdote is just like one piece, and then story is like encompassing like a start and an end. But I feel like it's just more thorough, comprehensive.
Mhm. Totally. Yeah. Story can be the umbrella and anecdotes can kind of make up the building blocks of a story for sure.
I feel like with a story, the character or the storyteller goes through a transformation, and it doesn't have, right, like it doesn't have to be a huge, but they're different somehow at the end than they were when they started the story.
Yeah, I think that change or growth, Erica, is so important. Um, Whether it's a change in the person, and I think that's usually where the change happens, but sometimes it can be a change in the world or the setting of the story. But yeah, something needs to shift. We need to feel like we've gone on a journey through a story, where in an anecdote, it can be just kind of a one-off experience that happened that didn't necessarily change or transform the storyteller as a person.
I'll call out what Joyce is saying in the chat that the stakes keep rising. And that's even another form of change, is just that the stakes can go from low to high or high to low. Um, I'm curious, Tay, since we didn't get to hear the full story, do you want to talk a little bit about like what was the change that you were hoping as a storyteller to convey across your story?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I haven't fully articulated the answer to this in a while, but I think there is something about um, an element of this story is certainly the self-doubt. And I think it's almost a character in the story that like is lingering and keeps coming back. And so I think there's something there about like, you know, my therapist would say that this is like, doubt or uncertainty is always going to be a part of life, wherever you are, whether it's in Philadelphia or in Tokyo, that uncertainty will follow you wherever you're going. But at the same time, there are things that you can do to make yourself feel like accomplished or enough.
Yeah, I like that. Like one of the themes, since I didn't get to hear the whole story, I don't want to like impose this upon your story, of course. But that
Please.
idea of like, what does it mean to make our mark, right? Like you went all the way to Japan. Like you
Mhm.
went out on a limb and then all this wild, unexpected stuff. And so, it's like a perspective too of like on the dream because we have the idyllic version and then the versions and why one's not necessarily better than the other. Like the shift could be like how we perceive. It wasn't Broadway, but then you had this other, so we're writing our own narrative of our life. We have that choice to make it like not a failed dream, right? That story could have gone and then I didn't get any, like my real, so I liked that it had that depth and like I didn't know which road you were going to go down. So, like the whole time I was, waiting for all of it. And so the delivery was, yeah, was really great in that way too.
Thank you. Yeah, there's always an element of surprise. And like, yeah, life is unexpected. I think that's maybe part of why we gravitate towards true stories. But again, we have told fictional stories in the past. It's just that the world is weird and like you don't know what you're going to find going down a certain route or if you take a plane to Tokyo.
Mhm.
You should write that down. That right there. You never, right? That was so
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Totally. I love when stories can keep evolving. I feel like they can change every time you tell it, and they can be something where, yeah, the more you think about them, the more you tell them the story is, especially oral storytelling, when you don't physically have to edit it, when it just can become edited in your mind and how you sense something or what you felt about it or how your memories change naturally over time. Like the editing often happens internally, which is pretty interesting. But yeah, that makes me, what you're saying, Erica, makes me think about how the stakes and the change are often very intimately intertwined. Where there are these big stakes, like the kind of obvious stakes in Tay's story. It sounds like is this, big performance and having to nail the notes of Bruno Mars. But like the internal stakes and the emotional stakes are equally as high and maybe even more interesting of like seeing yourself as a performer or feeling as though you are making a mark or being heard and all the different ways in which that's behind the scenes, right out on center stage to 6-year-olds to all of Tokyo in the karaoke studio. Yeah, the kind of internal changes can be less obvious, but a really important thread to kind of pull in your story. And sometimes you have both, and you can kind of, yeah, play with when you focus on the internal and when you focus on the external stakes. All right, Tay, do you want to say anything else about, I don't know, even the process of crafting this story and how it went or how it evolved?
Yeah, I mean, it evolved quite a bit. This it started really just because this was an anecdote, and like part of the reason maybe I got the job at Back Pocket is that like I had this sort of theater background. I went on to get study journalism, and I think I told this anecdote in, my early interview, and it was just amusing. And like occasionally, our coworkers would be like, "Tay, you got to tell that story," like if Bruno Mars or whatever came up in conversation. Um, and then as we landed on the theme for this show, which was about music and about silence and sound and the power that sound has to affect and um, manipulate emotion. Um, my co-producers, Grace was not part of the team at this time, but we were like, yeah, you have to do this story. And at that point, I had only sort of told the story off the cuff. And the process of adapting that kind of off the cuff telling of the story to the paper, it took a lot of work and multiple drafts and iterations. And yeah, I mean, some of the things that we've talked about in terms of efficiency and getting from, the cafe to Tokyo quickly, those were things that really formed in the editing stage. And by telling the story out loud and practicing it with my fiance and yeah, really just like getting it out there. And then also, I mean, one of the things for oral storytelling is folks sometimes are uncomfortable hearing the sound of their own voice. I've worked sort of with my voice long enough that it doesn't make me uncomfortable, but that's a very real phenomenon. That said, I think there is something really important about recording yourself telling these stories and then listening back to it. And that's a tool that we found really helpful for storytellers that we work with in that it will allow you to hear where you're excited about the story, where you're on the edge of your seat, where you're like really following along, and then also as you're sort of in the perspective or hearing the story from the perspective of the audience, where you're drifting, where the story isn't working for you, where like something isn't clicking. Um, and so that can be a helpful tool.
Awesome. Yeah, maybe just to piggyback a couple other quick tips on kind of writing to be heard instead of read. Um, and then we'll kind of wrap up, is that something that it took a while for me to learn from going from writing short stories to kind of writing stories to tell them, was just how much you have to change in your writing style because the audience isn't going to be able to read or reread or pause anything that you're saying. I forgot that when you have a page in front of you, it's really the person who's reading it who controls the pace. And they can go slow and they can look back and they can connect things. But when you're speaking a story, it's this teller that controls the pace. And they're like on the train and they're moving, and you don't actually get the chance to stop them. And so one thing, if you are writing an oral story, is that it requires, I think, a much clearer and simpler, like story spine, sometimes people call it, like the kind of backbone of the story of the beginning and the climax and the change and how the scenes move from one to the other. Because when you're just trying to remember something and you can't actually pause, yeah, we need something pretty simple to grasp onto. And I've worked with a lot of storytellers who feel like mapping out a story in that kind of maybe more predictable way of the beginning and the climax and having the change move across time. They think, oh, that's kind of trite, or, stories don't have to be that simple. But I've found in my experience that actually having that really kind of solid story infrastructure of just the spine of the scenes going from one to the other. It doesn't actually have to be simple, but it can really set you up for success to have like that easily graspable narrative and plot so that you can be creative and unexpected and weird and break all sorts of other rules. But when it's being spoken, it's like the foundation of having that clearly followable narrative or plot point can be really helpful and kind of be your foundation for the rest of your craft. And then last thing, before I turn it over to Tay, is that repetition is really your friend when speaking a story. If you noticed when Tay was speaking, he mentioned Broadway a couple times and kept returning to that idea of it was his friend that had gotten the job on Broadway. And he said something like, I thought this wasn't Broadway, but, and he had this one idea that he kept calling back to. And I think people are really wired for that repetition when they're hearing it. You'll hear a concept and your brain is just like, oh, that's familiar. Like I've heard that before. And it can be really satisfying as a listener. So while in a written story, that repetition can be a little much, in a spoken story, it actually really makes the audience feel like they're grasping something and like they're on board. And it can be a really helpful experience.
Yeah, and I realize, as with most online classes or just classes in general, we had high aspirations for all of these things that we get to talk about, and it's already 4:53. And so I'll go through this stuff pretty quickly. But in terms of delivering the story, these are some things that I think you all brought up as we were taking those pauses, and I was telling the story about my life in Japan. One is like a conversational tone. I mean, this is a stylistic choice. This is what we do at StoryFest, but we do want it to feel like the storyteller, rather than speaking from one to many, even though that is the format of our shows. We're in a theater, we're presenting in front of hundreds of people. It feels like it's one-to-one, that you're talking to a friend. And so there are ways that you can do that. One is just, casual writing and allowing yourselves to have ums and ahs and pauses and allowing yourself to discover your words and the story in real time. There are other things that you can do, like I mentioned, practicing with a friend or a family member and envisioning that person as you're telling the story, and how you have your own sort of dialogue and relationship with them, and they understand you, and you can just be yourself. Grace talked a lot about musicality in stories, tempo, pausing, volume. These are all sort of knobs or levers that you can dial up or dial down to create dynamics, essentially, in the story. And you can think of your story, the spine that Grace mentioned. Where are the peaks? Where are the valleys? You can use slowing down to really make people sort of like lean in. It's counterintuitive, but sometimes speaking really quietly will again make people pay attention. And then this is par for the course with getting in front of people. Stage fright, I think, is one of the top 3 to 5 fears that people have, and it's understandable. I will say that even though I've gotten in front of hundreds of people, again, mostly 6-year-olds, in my life, you never don't get nervous. Like that's always going to be a part of it. One tip I have there is that the sensation you have when you're nervous is very similar to the sensations you have when you're excited. And so if you can mentally kind of rewire or reframe that nervous energy that you have to be like, no, this isn't nervousness, this is excitement. That can frame it in a positive way and get you more sort of like stoked for what you're doing. And of course, the other thing is to practice and practice and practice. Um, yeah, and that's just, almost the end of our time. I hope you all found this helpful. It was really lovely to meet you all, and thank you for your beautiful thoughts and for listening to, my story. Um, we would love for you all to think about pitching StoryFest. If you've got a story that you want to tell, again, this could be a true story from your life, something more anecdotal. It could as well be a piece of fiction. I should have mentioned this earlier, but we have a zine that accompanies the show where we showcase visual art and poetry. So your story could live in that form as well. If you're thinking about pitching us, please be sure to, yeah, identify the main scenes, the primary characters, and think about that sort of like unexpected thing. Keep it, if you can, under 500 words. It can be bullet points. And yeah, anything to add there, Rose?
To this question in the chat, yes, villains is the theme for all cities this year. And yeah, just that you do not have to ever have told a story in front of other people to have a great story to tell. Your pitch could be an idea and bullet points, and we can help support you to hone it and make it into something that you're really excited to speak about. So if you even have a passing interest or feel like you have a SEPTA story or whatnot, would totally love to work with one of you all as a story fest. So we'd love to hear from you.
Is it just emailing the pitch like in like a Word document, or is there like it's not like a survey or anything, just like a Word document, attach it? Cool. All
Yep.
right.
Yeah, that's perfect. Or in an email or yeah, whatever. We're pretty casual about how we receive pitches.
All right, cool. Just wanted to make sure of the format. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
The process, so in the case like a pitch is chosen, then that's when the writer works with the team to develop the story.
Yeah, usually we'll have a couple sort of like introductory or screening calls after we've gotten the pitch to get a sense of like you and your voice and your style. And as we're thinking about assembling StoryFest, we think about it like a magazine of sorts, where again, we've got a variety of tones and subject matters. Um, and so trying to identify, like what is interesting and unique and fun about this take on villainy in Philadelphia. Um, and then, yeah, once the story is greenlit, you work with us. It's usually 1-to-1 or 1-to-2, like two of our producers and you, and it's pretty casual on a Zoom call. At first, we're just trying to like figure out that spine or the narrative arc of the story. And then it's folding in multimedia if it feels additive. And finally, yeah, it's practicing sort of the performance side of things. This is a paid opportunity, I should say, because there is, a decent amount of work that goes into it, probably 5 to 10 hours leading in the months leading up to the show.
Thank you.
It's a really fun process too. I feel like crafting stories communally is something I really enjoy. And I know Blue Stoop is a very community oriented place. So it's a really fun time to talk about your writing and think about it with other people and go back and forth and see kind of how you can shape the thing.
Cool. We'll pass back to you, Julian.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all of this super helpful information. I'm really excited for all of you. I hope you pitch. I would love to come see your stories live. Keep me posted. Um, and so with that, I will share a few links in our chat box here. There's a feedback survey at the top, so you can let us know what you thought of the session and what you want to see from us in the future. There's a link to our summer classes. They're not quite live yet, but there is a preview. You can get on a wait list, so that way you get an email directly from us as soon as they open for registration. And they are so cool. I can't tell you what they are, but they're so cool. You just have to trust me. You do want to find out when they go live. There's also a link to upcoming events. Our summer schedule is going to be kind of all over the place, but you can stay up to date with everything we're doing on that link and through our newsletter and social media, of course. But then you have to trust the algorithm. And what do you trust more? Your email inbox or the algorithm? So with that, there's a link to the weekly newsletter as well. And if you want to pitch in, support Blue Stoop and free public programs like this one, you can add a couple bucks to the collective piggy bank. That's an option as well. But more than anything, I'm just glad that you made time for yourself and your writing journey today. So glad you're here. And we would love to see you at future Blue Stoop events, including I will pitch this one last thing and then I'll let you go, including our community showcase, The Last Word, on June 13th at Fleischer Art Memorial. It is but $2 to attend, and we have like food and drink and stuff, so it's going to be a great time, worth your energy. Would love to see you there, and you'll get to hear from the talented students and instructors of Blue Stoop the last couple semesters. So it's going to be a great time. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's more fun with you there. And with that, I will let you go. I'll put this recording on YouTube for everyone to enjoy, and we'll follow up by email to share the link with you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, you
Thanks,
all.
Taylor.
Thanks,
Thanks,
y'all.
Grace.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Let those links linger for a second. Grab them if you need them. All right. Catch you next time.